The First Indochina War marks a significant chapter in Vietnam's tumultuous journey toward independence, a conflict deeply intertwined with global political dynamics and colonial legacies. Emerging from the shadows of World War II, this war would set the stage for a broader, more complex struggle that extended far beyond Vietnam's borders. It was a time of great upheaval, where the aspirations of a people yearning for self-determination clashed with the vested interests of colonial powers, igniting a conflict that would last nearly a decade. The birth of the Viet Minh and the drive for independence. The origins of the First Indochina War lie in the rise of the Viet Minh, a nationalist movement led by the revolutionary figure Ho Chi Minh. Founded in 1941, the Viet Minh sought to liberate Vietnam from both Japanese occupation during World War II and French colonial control. Based on a communist ideology, their mission was clear: to achieve independence and unify Vietnam under a sovereign government free from foreign domination. When Japan surrendered in 1945, it left a power vacuum in Indochina. This provided the Viet Minh with an opportunity to assert their authority. In the chaotic aftermath of Japan's defeat, Saigon's administrative systems collapsed, leaving the South in turmoil. Meanwhile, Ho Chi Minh and his Viet Minh forces seized Hanoi, proclaiming the establishment of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam on September 2, 1945, a symbolic date as it coincided with Japan's formal surrender in World War II. However, Vietnam's newfound independence was far from secure. The international community, particularly the Allies, had already decided that Indochina would remain under French control. The country was divided at the 16th parallel, with the Chinese nationalists taking control in the north and British Indian forces occupying the south. This division foreshadowed the future geopolitical struggles that would engulf Vietnam. A struggle between moderation and conflict. Initially, Ho Chi Minh attempted to avoid military conflict with the French. He sought diplomatic solutions, asking for French withdrawal while proposing cooperation with French engineers and professors to build a modern Vietnam. Yet, his hopes for a peaceful resolution were dashed. The French government, still clinging to its colonial ambitions despite being weakened by the German occupation during World War II, refused to entertain Ho's vision of independence. In response, the Viet Minh resorted to guerrilla warfare. By late 1946, they launched a campaign against the French, marking the beginning of the First Indochina War. The French Far East Expeditionary Corps, dispatched to re-establish colonial rule, found itself mired in a protracted conflict against a determined and resourceful Vietnamese force. The nature of guerrilla warfare. The First Indochina War was characterized by the asymmetry of power between the French colonial forces and the Viet Minh. The French, with superior military resources, faced a highly motivated and resilient opponent in the Viet Minh. The war saw classic guerrilla tactics, ambushes, hit-and-run attacks, and the strategic use of Vietnam's difficult terrain, employed effectively by the Viet Minh. The rugged jungles, mountains, and rural villages of northern Vietnam became their battlefield, where local knowledge provided a critical advantage. The war was not only a struggle for independence but also a fight for the hearts and minds of the Vietnamese people. The Viet Minh's ability to rally popular support, especially in the countryside, proved essential to their resistance efforts. Meanwhile, the French, despite their technological superiority, found themselves increasingly isolated from the population, their colonial rule appearing more oppressive with each passing year. The turning point, Dien Bien Phu. The tide of war shifted dramatically in 1954, at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, located in a remote valley in northwestern Vietnam. Dien Bien Phu was where the French decided to make a final stand, intending to draw the Viet Minh into a decisive confrontation. However, this proved to be a catastrophic miscalculation. Under the command of General Vo Nguyen Giap, the Viet Minh encircled the French stronghold, employing their knowledge of the terrain and relentless determination. For 56 days, they bombarded the French positions, eventually leading to the fall of the fortress. The defeat at Dien Bien Phu was a devastating blow to French morale and marked the end of their colonial ambitions in Indochina, the Geneva Accords, and the partition of Vietnam. The collapse of French forces at Dien Bien Phu opened the door to diplomatic negotiations. In July 1954, the Geneva Conference was convened to address the conflict in Indochina. The resulting Geneva Accords marked the end of French colonial rule in Vietnam and led to the partition of the country into two distinct regions. The communist-controlled North, under Ho Chi Minh's Democratic Republic of Vietnam, and the anti-communist South, led by the State of Vietnam. The 17th parallel served as the dividing line between North and South Vietnam. The accord stipulated that the division was temporary and that national elections would be held in 1956 to reunite the country. However, these elections never took place, setting the stage for the subsequent Vietnam War. The migration and political realignment. Following the partition, a mass migration ensued. Nearly 1 million people, primarily Catholics from the North, fled to the South, fearing persecution by the communist regime. This migration was facilitated in part by the United States, which saw South Vietnam as a bulwark against the spread of communism in Southeast Asia. In the South, Ngo Dinh Diem, the Prime Minister of the State of Vietnam, solidified his power through a fraudulent referendum that ousted the reigning emperor, Bao Dai. Diem declared himself president of the newly formed Republic of Vietnam, with the support of the United States and other Western allies. Meanwhile, the North remained under the control of Ho Chi Minh's communist government, backed by the Soviet Union and China, a prelude to further conflict. Though the First Indochina War had ended, the division of Vietnam at the 17th parallel was not a permanent solution. Both North and South Vietnam prepared for the next phase of conflict, each backed by rival Cold War superpowers. The ideological divide between communism and capitalism became a global battleground, with Vietnam at its center. The First Indochina War set the stage for decades of conflict, with the legacy of colonialism, nationalism, and Cold War politics shaping the future of Vietnam and Southeast Asia. The war was a testament to the resilience of the Vietnamese people and their unwavering pursuit of independence, a theme that would echo throughout the rest of the 20th century. Conclusion. The First Indochina War was more than just a struggle between Vietnam and France. It was a clash of ideologies, empires, and aspirations. It highlighted the determination of the Vietnamese to forge their own destiny, even against overwhelming odds. The war's outcome, especially the defeat of French forces at Dien Bien Phu, marked the end of European colonialism in Southeast Asia and signaled the beginning of a new, more complex phase in Vietnam's history, one that would culminate in the Vietnam War and the eventual reunification of the country. In the context of global history, the First Indochina War serves as a powerful example of the broader movements for independence and self-determination that swept across the world in the aftermath of World War II. For Vietnam, it was the first step on a long and arduous path toward sovereignty, a path that would ultimately shape the nation and its people.